Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. The coronavirus pandemic is changing life as we know it, with many things we once took for granted now coming to a grinding halt. Here's the latest. All Catholic and public schools are closed in New York City. All public masses are suspended in the Diocese of Brooklyn and the New York Archdiocese. And crowds of more than 50 people are being banned across the tri-state region. Governor Andrew Cuomo reaching a deal with the governors of New Jersey and Connecticut for the cutbacks.
There will be no more gatherings of 50+ people. So if you were hoping to plan a graduation party, you can't do it in the state of New York, you can't go do it in the state of New Jersey, and you can't do it in the state of Connecticut.
The ban begins at 8 tonight and also applies to bars and restaurants, which are being limited to takeout and delivery, along with casinos, gyms, and movie theaters. Supermarkets, gas stations, and pharmacies will remain open. All schools in New York City, both Catholic and public, are closed to protect students and teachers from contracting the disease. Governor Cuomo is hoping the city's public schools could resume classes soon.
If in 2 weeks, miraculously, everything is fine, I'll reopen every school in New York in 2 weeks.
The Diocese of Brooklyn's elementary academies and parish schools are closed at least until April 20th. Teachers are making plans for online learning, which is set to begin tomorrow. The school's office is advising parents to monitor school websites for further updates. At Cathedral Prep School and Seminary, administrators are leading the country in so-called distance learning. They've been prepping to take action since the beginning of the school year, and today they're already wrapping up their first day of virtual classes. Currents News' Tim Harfmann is standing by at the school in Elmhurst, Queens. Tim.
Christine, at a time when there's a lot of uncertainty and anxiety, school officials are confident that students are prepared to work from home. That's mainly because they've been using distance learning for months.
Its hallways, classrooms, and chapel are empty. The only sounds you hear? Maintenance men disinfecting the building. Cathedral Prep School and Seminary in Elmhurst may be closed this week as a precaution, but there's no time lost. Catholic high school students are learning online every day.
We can try to give them as much of a normal experience as possible.
Cathedral's rector-president, Father James Caroli, says they've had this emergency plan in place since September. Nearly 160 students are studying from home.
It's through Google Classroom, and they're able to respond to the question as well as respond to one another.
Teachers also use email and other methods to have constant communication.
The teacher is not in front of you, but the teacher is providing the resources, the information, so that learning is able to take place.
Though teachers and students don't meet face-to-face online, Father Caroli FaceTimed members of Cathedral's administration this morning. Principal Richie Diaz says the all-boys Catholic high school has been ahead of the curve when it comes to distance learning. Seniors have been taking an online class all year.
The fact that we've really been doing some level of this throughout the school year makes me confident that the students are comfortable with the technology, and also that, to be quite honest, that they're humble enough to know that this is not an ideal situation and that they're going to work with us.
Distance learning is made possible thanks in part to DeSales Media Group, our parent company, which provides technology for learning.
We were able to work with one of our great partners, Cathedral Prep, in making sure that young people are able to continue to go to school even as the rest of the city and even our public schools are not able to.
And school officials made the decision this morning that Cathedral Prep will also be closed until at least Monday, April 20th. So students will continue to work from home. In Elmhurst, Queens, Tim Harfmann, Currents News. Christine, back to you.
Tim, has Cathedral Prep experienced any technical issues with the distance learning?
Students were required to go online over the weekend to check their login. Father Caroli tells us of the 160 students, 17 had issues, but says the majority of them were just students not checking their emails. We're told as of this moment, assignments are being submitted online accordingly. Christine.
All right, Tim, thank you so much. All public masses in the Diocese of Brooklyn are suspended until further notice, and Bishop DiMarzio has issued a dispensation from the obligation to attend Sunday Mass. At the same time, many churches in Brooklyn and Queens are open to parishioners for prayer. They're offering a sense of community and companionship during the pandemic, and the faithful are being urged to watch the celebration of the Eucharist on television. Net TV is broadcasting several weekday Masses Monday through Friday. At 8 a.m., Mass will be shown from the Co-Cathedral of St. Joseph, followed by the Spanish liturgy at 9. At noon, Mass from St. James Cathedral Basilica will be televised. At 2:30 in the afternoon, the Pope's celebration of the liturgy from the chapel in Santa Marta will be on the air. Then at 5 o'clock, an encore of the Mass at St. James will be presented. At 6:30 p.m., Mass from St. Patrick's Cathedral will be on Net TV. The schedule is online at netny.tv, and if you missed any of these times, we'll repeat them for you at the end of the program. Now more than ever, you need to subscribe to the tablet. All the information on how the coronavirus is impacting the church can be found there. And since Masses are suspended, you'll want the paper to come to your mailbox through a subscription. You'll save up to 55% by having it delivered to your home. Go to the website, thetablet.org/home55, or call 877-883-8356. President Trump is toughening the guidelines to help the country cope with the coronavirus pandemic. He appeared in the White House briefing room late this afternoon.
We've made the decision to further toughen the guidelines and blunt the infection now. We'd much rather be ahead of the curve than behind it, and that's what we are. Therefore, my administration is recommending that all Americans, including the young and healthy, work to engage in schooling from home when possible, avoid gathering in groups of more than 10 people, avoid discretionary travel, and avoid eating and drinking at bars, restaurants, and public food courts.
Are you considering instituting a nationwide lockdown, a nationwide quarantine? The NSC knocked that down, but there's still some questions about how it all came
At this
to be.
point, not nationwide, but well, there are some places in our nation that are not very affected at all. But we may look at certain areas, certain hotspots, as they call them. We'll be looking at that. But at this moment, no, we're not.
The new guidelines from the president are similar to those already announced in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. The one major difference is the gathering of people. Trump wants a 10-person limit, while in our area the cap is 50 people. It was a very rough day on Wall Street. The Fed rate cut to zero had zero impact on investors. The emergency reduction late yesterday led to a huge downturn today that started at the opening bell, with the three major indexes losing at least 12%. The Dow ended trading down almost 3,000 points to finish at 20,186. The Nasdaq was off almost 1,000 points, closing at 6904, and the S&P lost over 320 points and ended at 2386. Meanwhile, here in the U.S., a priest in the Diocese of Yakima, Washington, has been diagnosed with the virus. 48-year-old Father Alejandro Trejo is recovering at the hospital. In Italy, the pandemic is raging at its worst. On Sunday, there were 368 more deaths, bringing the overall toll to more than 2,000. Among them, 6 Catholic priests from the same city who died during the past week. Northern Italy's city of Bergamo is at the heart of the European coronavirus crisis. As of Sunday, more than 20 priests were in the hospital there. Many bishops in the United States are calling for their seminarians to come home from Rome. The move reportedly involves those attending the North American Seminary. Many foreign seminaries left the Eternal City ahead of restrictions on travel from Europe. Americans are still able to return to the U.S. despite the ban against arrivals from Europe. Holy Week in Rome is bound to be different this year, but exactly what it will look like is still not known. The prefecture of the papal household posted on its website that all celebrations during Holy Week will be held without the physical presence of the faithful. But then a Vatican spokesperson said while the celebrations are confirmed, any other details would be communicated later. Right now, the Pope is live streaming his masses, but despite the lockdown, Francis ventured out through the empty streets of Rome to visit 2 special places to pray.
Uniti a Cristo, non siamo mai soli.
The Pope was mostly alone when he walked the streets of Rome on Sunday. While Italy is on lockdown, Pope Francis left the Vatican to visit 2 pilgrimage sites to pray for an end to the coronavirus pandemic. First, he prayed before the icon of Mary in the Basilica of St. Mary Major. Then he went to the Church of San Marcello al Corso to pray before a wooden crucifix that's said to have protected Rome from a great plague. According to the Vatican, Francis implored the healing of so many sick people, remembered the victims, and asked that their family and friends find comfort. He also prayed for health professionals. The streets of Rome are empty as families are quarantined in their homes. Earlier, the pontiff prayed for them.
Che il Signore li aiuti a scoprire nuovi modi, nuove espressione di amore, di convivenza in questa situazione nuova. È un'occasione bella per ritrovare i veri affetti con una creatività nella famiglia.
And it is the creativity of priests that Pope Francis talked about while praying the Angelus from his library in the Apostolic Palace. He thanked priests who have remained by the faithful in these difficult times.
Sacerdoti che pensano 1000 modi di essere vicino al popolo, perché il popolo non si senta abbandonato.
The Pope's daily Mass is being live streamed. Following the Angelus, he went to the window from where he normally addresses the usual crowd of pilgrims in St. Peter's Square and blessed the deserted streets of Rome and, by extension, the world. The silent blessing the Pope made at the window, making the sign of the cross as a sign of closeness to people around the world impacted by this pandemic. And stay right here. The editor of Crux, John Allen, joins us from Rome to talk about what's happening with the church and the Eternal City. That's still ahead in this newscast. There's a lot more news headed your way. Queen's parishioners are blessed with a saint's relic that has special meaning these days. And a state is planning a special day to honor the patron saint of immigrants, Mother Cabrini. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. One of the final public masses to be celebrated in the Diocese of Brooklyn. Bishop DiMarzio has suspended services amid the continuing and growing concern about the spread of the COVID-19 virus. Sunday was the last time for Catholics to worship together at church, at least for the time being. As Currents News' Tim HARFMANN reports, one parish in Fresh Meadows, Queens is hoping for a saint's intercession during this crisis.
This was the last Sunday with public masses. Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio has suspended weekday and weekend masses in Brooklyn and Queens until further notice.
That's actually very disheartening because this is something that I look forward to every Sunday, and this is undescribable.
Bishop DiMarzio is also lifting the obligation for Catholics to attend Sunday Mass. At Holy Family Church in Fresh Meadows, Queens, nearly 70 parishioners worshipped at Sunday's noon Mass, which is about half the normal attendance.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son.
The Catholics were blessed with the relic of St. Rosalie. She is credited for interceding for the citizens of Palermo, Italy in 1624. Many of them were dying from the Black Plague.
The bishop at that time took the relic of St. Rosalie and in procession went around the entire diocese and blessed all the people, and quickly that plague dissipated.
Holy Family's pastor, Father Sean Zukiel, says with the coronavirus crisis growing in New York and around the country, now is a good time to turn to St. Rosalie once again.
Just to bring hope and healing to uncertainty for our people, right? Like there's a high level of anxiety and a fear of uncertainty. What's going to happen next?
Students at the parish's Catholic Academy can't go to school right now, but they know what they can do.
You could still go home and pray to God and worship Him like you do at Mass.
What we do know is that hope doesn't disappoint, that God is with us, and He's going to sustain us.
So that Catholics can pray to the Lord for strength, Father Sukiel is keeping Holy Family open every day. In Fresh Meadows, Queens, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
The virus is having a profound impact on the church. Public masses are being suspended, and Holy Week is going to be different this year. Joining us now from Rome is John Allen, the editor-in-chief of Crux. John, thanks for joining us. First, tell us how the pandemic is impacting Rome and the Vatican. The Pope was out and about in the city yesterday, and while Holy Week is likely to undergo big changes this year, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Rome, essentially, like every other major metropolitan area in Italy, has come to a standstill. Virtually everything is closed. The only things that are allowed by government decree to remain open would be what are defined as essential services, mostly grocery stores and pharmacies. Public transportation is essentially ground to a halt. People are not supposed to be out. You're only supposed to be out if you have a reason of work or a grave reason of health or necessities, such as going to one of those grocery stores to do your shopping. Other than that, you're not supposed to be outside. You are supposed to maintain an appropriate distance. The one source of relief Romans have found is their balconies. Every day here at 6 o'clock, we have a kind of flash mob where everybody goes out onto the balcony or the terrace. Music is played, people are applauding. They chat at a distance. Italians are, of course, an extraordinarily social people, and that's about the only way we have found to date to cope with the creeping claustrophobia of this unprecedented nationwide lockdown.
I was going to ask you about that sense of community. We all saw that video of everybody coming on their balconies and singing. That's just wonderful to see. What about the churches, though? Because when the diocese decided to close the churches, the Pope pushed back, saying not all drastic measures are good. Then came word the churches would stay open. So what's happening with that confusion?
Well, I think the short answer is it hasn't yet quite been resolved. Basically, the Diocese of Rome announced one day, it was last Friday, that the churches were going to close because that was the day the government decided everything else was going to close. And then the next morning, as you noted, Pope Francis celebrated his daily mass, obviously raising questions about that. Later that morning, there was a conversation between the Pope and the Cardinal Vicar of Rome, Cardinal Angelo de Donatis, out of which came this new decree that said, all right, parish churches can remain open. All other churches and places of worship need to remain closed. And those parish churches are not supposed to be having public liturgies, that is the regular Sunday Mass and so on. But people can go to those churches to pray. I can tell you from personal experience that there are some parishes here in Rome where pastors, inspired a bit by some of the Pope's language about the importance of priests getting out and being with people during this time of crisis, some of these pastors are quietly still having masses. They are not advertising them, but word kind of gets around, and people who want to brave the pandemic can do so. They obviously don't want to call attention to that because it's a controversial practice. Some people think it's irresponsible, that it risks transmitting the disease. Other people think that it's kind of pastoral courage in a time of great need. And at least so far, that argument has not been resolved from on high.
Wow. Well, Holy Week's going to look a lot different. Can you talk about that, the feeling there in Rome?
Well, we know that this is not going to be an ordinary Holy Week. Let us note that the restrictions imposed by the Italian government, theoretically, were set to expire on April 3rd, which is the Friday before Palm Sunday. However, I think everyone takes for granted, given that the Prime Minister, Giuseppe Conte, just yesterday said we have not yet reached the peak of this disease, and that we're going to have to accept these restrictions longer. I think everyone believes that they will extend through Holy Week, which likely means that the Vatican is not going to be able to hold the big public Holy Week events, that is Palm Sunday and then Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and ultimately Easter Sunday. There are not going to be these huge crowds in St. Peter's Square that we are accustomed to seeing. The prefecture of the papal household actually a couple of days ago announced that these liturgies would be held without people, without the presence of the faithful. Then that was sort of taken back a little bit by the Vatican spokesman who said, well, we're studying what to do. I think they're trying to give themselves the option of a last minute out if it turns out that by Easter Sunday, for instance, the Italian authorities have decided that we can ease up a little bit. I think they want to have that option. But certainly this is going to be a more subdued, restrained, and limited affair than we are accustomed to seeing. Although it's important to emphasize the Vatican has said that Pope Francis will indeed celebrate all the Holy Week liturgies. They will all be live streamed and broadcast around the world. So even if you are still under a quarantine or a lockdown, you will at least be able to see the Pope lead the church through Holy Week.
All right, sounds good. John Allen, the editor-in-chief of Crux, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
There's been a revelation at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. What they thought were the oldest known copies of the Hebrew Bible are in fact fake. The 16 Dead Sea Scrolls fragments were all forgeries that managed to dupe outside collectors, the museum's founder, and some of the world's leading biblical scholars. The CEO of the museum says we're victims of fraud. Colorado senators are replacing Columbus Day in honor of a Catholic saint. The bill moves Columbus Day, replacing it with a different holiday, one that honors the patron saint of immigrants, Mother Cabrini. The measure, now awaiting approval by the state's governor, will have Cabrini Day observed on the first Monday of October and Columbus Day moved to the second Monday. Still to come on Currents News, we'll show you how a student is making a difference in the lives of senior citizens coping with the pandemic. And in Catholic Italy, residents are joining together in song to boost spirits at a hard time. Italians being quarantined for weeks are trying to make the best of a bad situation with music. As John Allen mentioned before, you can hear the people sing every night at 6 p.m. as the Italians in Rome lean out of their balconies and sing their national anthem. Neighbors also took the chance to talk to each other and wave at their fellow neighbors. And in the U.S., people are finding ways to lend a helping hand to their neighbors. In Las Vegas, a group of angels is helping the elderly with their groceries. The Shopping Angels is a program started by a pre-med student who wanted to make sure those in need get the necessities.
Going to one store could be an all-day affair for an elderly person. You know, they don't have a lot of money to spend on gas and, you know, a lot of energy to drive around to all different stores only to find out that they can't even get the basic supplies that they need to last them for a couple weeks.
More than 36 college students have already volunteered to deliver the much-needed supplies. They're required to wear face masks and gloves and to not enter the homes of those they are helping. And finally tonight, while public masses in the Diocese of Brooklyn have been canceled, Net TV is where you can come to stay connected. Once again, here's the schedule. Monday through Friday at 8 a.m., Mass will be shown from the Co-Cathedral of St. Joseph, followed by the Spanish liturgy at 9. At noon, Mass from St. James Cathedral Basilica will be televised. At 2:30 p.m., the Pope's celebration of the liturgy from the chapel in Santa Marta will be on the air. Then at 5 o'clock, the Mass at St. James will be rebroadcast. At 6:30 p.m., Mass from St. Patrick's Cathedral will be on Net TV. The schedule is online at netny.tv. That is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.